Hey, Chris Cuomo here. Happy Monday. Welcome to NewsNation. How about I serve up a little fast food for thought? Keying, of course, off former President Trump's foray into French fries.
If you don't mind, I want to work the French fry counter.
Absolutely.
Okay, keep it tight. You got the salt on it. Never touches the human hand.
Very good. Very
nice
good.
And full. How many would you put in a bag like this? Like 6, you could? 6 mediums?
5 is fine.
But I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again.
Thank you.
Look at that. Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
He'd like the job because he'd be eating all the profits. He notoriously loves fast food. Now, that may be what he has most in common with the American worker, okay? Now, look, this was a good move. Wage workers like those at McDonald's, especially those making minimum wage, right? That's around 30 grand for an individual family, somewhere around 70. That population is probably half or more of the electorate. Maybe even more in swing states, by the way, depending on which one. So this is the right group for Trump to try to cozy up to. That's why, this was a little bit of a riff on Harris trying to own this population in different ways, but one of them is her personal history, right? VP Harris mentions often that she worked at Mickey D's. So Trump was trying to take that, but more importantly, he wants the constituency. And Trump may have already worked magic by becoming the agent of animus for a group of Americans he shares almost nothing with in terms of upbringing and economic realities. However, he can talk the talk. And when you're angry, talk matters. But photo ops are not walking the walk. So I wanted to check the record and look at what Trump has cooked up for this group and is planning to cook up for them as president. And I got to tell you, I don't think it's as appetizing. For example, what's the most important issue for these guys economically? Minimum wage, right? So where's Trump on the minimum wage?
Minimum wage should be raised.
Well, I think these people work hard. They're great. And I just saw something, a process that's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. These are great franchises and produce a lot of jobs, and it's great. And great people working here, too.
But minimum wage is
really taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world. I hate to say it, but we have to leave it the way it is. People have to go out, they have to work really hard, and they have to get into that upper stratum.
So do not raise the minimum wage.
I would not raise the minimum.
That's why he was silent at the service window, okay? He is beholden to a fringe flank, which is a rare breed of populists. And I do it like this because they cater to corporate interests fiscally. And you just saw what he really thinks about the people's destiny that he had right behind him in that window. Wages are too high. Got to keep the minimum wage where it is. The federal minimum wage is like $7.50. Say that in the kitchen. And no, it's not just one soundbite. And no, Trump did not raise wages. I know that's out there. It's just not true. The Trump administration opposed the 15 minimum wage bill in 2019. In 2020, he said the states should decide on minimum wages. It was just punting, right? On doing anything, by the way, an example of who his policies catered to. It's not good or bad. It's a policy choice. The franchisee who owns the McDonald's that Trump was just out lobbied against the state proposal to make more workers eligible for overtime. Okay? That's the guy that owns the place that he was in. That's why Obama tried to make the franchisees all independent employers so that they would have to be responsible for those under 500 worker plans of raising wages and giving sick leave and doing other things. McDonald's won under Trump, didn't have to follow what Obama wanted them to follow, didn't have to give workers as much, okay? And be clear, many McDonald's workers are already making less than a national average wage, okay? And 7 out of 10 of them are people of color. Close to 6 in 10 crew and managers are women. These are all groups that Trump wants to make inroads with. Now, a fair pushback is often, hold on. But he would have needed Congress for that. He did that part with his tax cuts in 2016, which gave more money in the pockets. Yeah, that's true. there was more money in the pockets. If you're talking about the pockets of the employer of those workers, right? Because it was McDonald's that got the big bump, not the workers. That wasn't a middle-class tax cut. Their rate went from what it was in 2017 to 2023 was a huge cut. Now, I don't have any problem with a tax cut. It's what do you do with it and when do you give it, okay? Now, economists can argue to you that it wasn't a great time to do those tax cuts, but what did they do with the extra earnings? Did they pass it along to workers in the form of wages? No. McDonald's will say, oh, hold on, I tripled the tuition fund for employees. True, they did. $150 million over 5 years. That's 30 a year, right? That's impressive. Until you remember, their net income just last year was $8.5 billion. Okay? So, why is Trump leading when it comes to the economy? 3 reasons. He talks about it all the time in terms of what's wrong with it, and overwhelmingly, that's where we are. Voters are negative on it. Positive views of the economy are under 30%. Okay? And things are more expensive now in the pocketbook economy. Gas, groceries, rent, etc. And Biden and Harris have to keep dealing with that by trading. It's not that bad. Nobody wants to hear that. Instead, they need to focus on why. Why? Which they haven't done. We're in a recovery. Why is America in a recovery? From the pandemic that Trump never includes as being on his watch, and how it crippled the economy early on. And ballooned inflation that was helped by Trump's unpaid for tax cuts and his spending that ballooned the deficit. And people will say, well, but when he left, the inflation rate was so low. It's a lagging indicator. But look, this isn't my argument to make. This is Harris's. This was Biden's. They're not making it. You know, during the pandemic, most McDonald's employees reported having no sick leave. Trump could have changed that. He didn't. 22% of the workers reported having to come in and work while sick because of no sick leave, and they were afraid they were going to get fired. And McDonald's, like a lot of big employers, got given breaks from Trump under the NLRB, right, the National Labor Relations Board, that allowed them more leverage over workers than they had during the Obama administration. That's the record, okay? But again, you campaign in poetry. You govern in prose, meaning it's all about how you talk the talk in an election. Let's bring in NewsNation correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera, and conservative podcast host who also knows a thing or two about working a fry station at a fast food restaurant, Rob Smith. All right, let's get these bona fides from Smith, Geraldo. What are you lording over me and Geraldo? Where'd you work the fries? You look like you never ate a French fry in your life, by the way.
No, trust me, I ate way too many French fries. I wasn't exactly a fry cook. I fried the chicken at KFC on weekends while I was active duty military. So I definitely have some fast food experience. And I remember frying the chicken at KFC and leaving maybe one too many pieces for myself on the side for the end of my shift. So I definitely know what it is to work in fast food, yes.
Well, I respect the service to the country most of all, of course, and service in this debate. Geraldo, I start with you. Trump is doing better with voters who are worried about the economy. Now, I laid out the realities for the wage workers that he was trying to shine up there at McDonald's, and that's a good move politically. Does he win that group despite everything that I just said?
I don't know whether he will win that group or not, Chris, but I can tell you this. I wish I had thought, as a supporter of Kamala Harris, I wish I had thought of this stunt for her. I thought it was a very clever, very cagey move by Trump. And not only does he seek to identify with the working class people, but more importantly, I think, and I think more accurately, is he wanted to bring on the McDonald's issue. He wanted to stage this event in McDonald's to make a point that Kamala Harris, the vice president, who continually campaigns as someone who's a just folks, working class, middle class. She worked at McDonald's back in 1983. Oh, yeah? Did she really? Where's the proof of that? That's what this Trump event has done. It has now shined a harsh spotlight, and this damn election is so close, it could swing on this very issue. Is Kamala Harris telling the truth about whether she worked in McDonald's at summer break in college? I think it is an important question. Frankly, in the words of Rep Butler, I don't give a damn, my dear. But a lot of people will, if they looking for an excuse not to vote for Kamala Harris. All right, prove it. She worked there. Who saw you work there? Give me your W-2 form. Show me, a picture of you in your McDonald's outfit from that summer of college. And if you didn't work there, did you lie about it? I think that
she's not going to say that. She's definitely not going to say that.
Diabolically clever move.
Look, but listen, this is not new. This is what you do.
About proving it?
Well, I don't know, as little as possible.
He has
right?
done it.
I mean, I'm sure McDonald's wasn't keeping records in the 80s the way it does now. Yeah, but that's not a surprise. I mean, they lie. Everybody's expecting everybody to lie about everything. The question is, at the end of the day, what seems like the best bet for voters to tolerate for the next 4 years? And people can say, Rob, but Harris has got to win then, because if you're talking about who you want to tolerate, it's easy to beat Trump. He's so unpopular. Trump is a metaphor for a movement of grievance. It's not Harris versus Trump. It's Harris versus people being upset. And on the economy, do you believe the analysis, Rob, is as simple as, if I'm not doing great right now, if I don't feel I'm doing great, I'm for Trump because it's Harris's fault?
I don't think so. Look, I don't think that I have to disagree with the characterization that the movement for Trump is a movement of grievance. I actually think that it's a movement towards people really wanting to go back to a time in which they were doing better. Gas was less expensive. Groceries are less expensive. There's a lot of people. I'm on the campaign trail for Trump right now. I'm doing some of these Trump unity events with the log cabin Republicans. And when you talk to people that come out to these events, there's a sort of nostalgia because they do remember their lives actually being better under Trump. What I will say about this McDonald's situation is that I think maybe subtly it was a little dig about whether or not Kamala Harris was telling the truth about her alleged McDonald's employment, but more so, it was a signal to a lot of working class people in this country that even though Trump may be a billionaire, even though this is somebody that was president before and is running for president again, this is somebody that still has a very real and very genuine connection with working class people. And I think that's the connection that can only come because he worked in business for so long, dealing with everyone from construction workers to CEOs and everything in between. I really do think that is what this is all about. And you can see
and is he or is he not? Is he or is he? Some of the left and some of the,
excuse me. And some of the left and some of the Democrats, the way that they have been so vociferously negative to this McDonald's appearance really does speak to a kind of elitism and classism that is becoming a function and a symbol of the modern Democrat Party. And I think that Trump going to McDonald's pretty much underlines that.
Not true. Right. Is Trump for a $15 an hour minimum wage, or is he not for a $15 an hour minimum wage?
Let's talk about. Well, give me a chance.
So much for the working class people. Does he want them to get a raise? Or,
okay,
hold it. You have plenty of time.
Rob, you got time, but also
is Trump for the minimum wage or not?
All right, yeah, Geraldo, I got you. Rob, we do it a little different here. The answer is no. He is not for increasing the minimum wage. That's why he said no in 2015, and that's why he said leave it to the states in 2020, and that's why he didn't answer the question at McDonald's the other day.
And this is what I think. Can I answer that? And this is what I think about the minimum wage. First of all, so Chris, you're in New York.
I didn't ask you what you think about it. The question was, does Trump want to raise it?
He doesn't want to raise it, and a lot of conservatives don't, because if you look at, let's talk about raising the minimum wage. Okay, so you're in New York. New York has raised the minimum wage to, I believe, $15 to $20 an hour. What large corporations do when states raise the minimum wage is they basically just lay off workers. And I don't know when's the last time you've been into a McDonald's, but you see more and more of those little kiosks where people go in
McDonald's
and put their orders. So a lot of these places, a lot of these places, when they replace workers with automation, it makes a $15 minimum wage moot. And by the way, and let me make one more point here, is that these jobs, and I have a lot of respect for it. Like I said, I fried chicken at KFC. There are people that work at McDonald's, et cetera. And number one, these jobs are not particularly meant to be full-time 40-hour-a-week jobs. And second of all, a lot of people that are at these jobs are using these jobs as a stepping stone. And with the proliferation of mass illegal immigration in this country, now we have people fighting for even these jobs. So I think that it is a very, very real point.
This is an elitist Republican take. All right. We get...
Geraldo, you're worth $20 million and you call a veteran that fried chicken at KFC an elitist. Are you serious? I have no issue with that. I love capitalism. But you are telling me that this is an elitist.
He's not calling you an elitist. Rob, he's not calling you an elitist. Geraldo, go ahead.
I'm not calling you anything. I'm not calling you anything. I don't know you. I don't know whether you worked wherever you say you worked. That's fine with me. I appreciate your service to our nation, and that takes priority over everything to me. You deserve our respect. Trump did a very cagey thing today. He did a very clever thing today. He staged an event because he wanted to point out that Kamala Harris has not proven her campaign rhetoric that otherwise would go unnoticed. Typical BS for politicians. Now they're calling her out. Did she or did she not work at McDonald's in 1983? And I submit to you, when a race is absolutely mathematically tied, that you're talking about 500 people, one way or another, can swing this thing. And if 500 people either don't like Kamala or are a little suspicious of her and are wondering whether this backstory, this origin story is true, this is the kind of thing that could cause her to stumble, because they're going to ask her about this every time there's a live mic in front of her for the next few days until this is resolved one way or the other. And I think that's why the scheme. And I'm for Kamala. I'm all in for the vice president. All right. I think it's much more important that Trump stab the Constitution in the back.
I got to go. Well, and look, he's for Harris, you're for Trump. But here's my point. If this election comes down to who lies the most, Rob, you got trouble, okay, in terms of what happens in the polls. But people are selective. People are selective about it, okay? Geraldo's point is well taken about how tight it is. And in fact, Geraldo and I haven't covered a race this tight, Rob, since 2004. You could say 2000, but really 2004. I haven't seen polls like this. And I know the polls are a little shaky, but even the Vegas odds have gone up and down. But I will say this, one thing, Rob, it's really interesting to me. Conservatives don't want to mess with the minimum wage because of how businesses respond. That's fine, but that's not a populist mentality. A populist who's a conservative and a wage worker does not feel that way. That's the entrepreneurial class that feels that way. And I understand why. We all do. We all took basic economics. But that is not a populist sentiment. That's what's so funky about the MAGA movement. It's a populist movement that caters to the top in terms of fiscal policy.
Well, I would have to disagree with you on that. I would say the MAGA movement is definitely a populist movement, but I think that it's made up a lot of more entrepreneurs and more small business owners than you really think. Look, I think what a lot of people don't understand is that the median income of the average Trump voter in 2020 was $98,000, I believe. So yes, there is a definite working class and there's definite a middle class and working class aspect of the MAGA movement. Absolutely. But I think that people kind of want to stereotype these people as if everybody's, wage workers or lower middle class or whatever. But it's a very large subset of people. There are some entrepreneurs, there's some small business owners. I'm just saying they want different things. I'm just saying people want different things. If you're a wage worker, you want wages. If you're an entrepreneurial class, you don't want to have the government telling you what to pay your workers. That's all, and I get it. But I got to jump. Rob Smith, thank you very much. Geraldo Rivera, I love you. It's great to see you both. We'll keep the conversation going. Can't believe how close it is till the election. 4 minutes and 5 seconds. New suits against Sean Diddy Combs. Oh, come on, I've heard it all. No, you haven't. This is an underage kid from the time. It's 20 years old. I'll give you that. Okay? But the allegation wraps in other major celebrities. What is the indication as to who they are? Because that's the concern that was never realized with Epstein that could be realized with Diddy. Who else was involved? Next. I'll say it again. Epstein left
people wanting to know who else knew. How is it that only Ghislaine Maxwell is the person that gets prosecuted when the whole thing was supposedly about Epstein using his parties for friends? Same thing with Sean Diddy Combs. Will this be more satisfying? Will this be more revealing? May 5th is the presumed trial date. 2 new suits go exactly to what I'm talking about. Ugly allegations. Underage kid, she says she was 13 at the time. It was 20 years ago, but says she was 13 at the time. Used drugs, had forced sex with Diddy and another male. That's where this gets interesting. Other celebrities now being implicated. One suit brought by a male personal trainer claims in 2022 he was invited to one of Diddy's parties, handed a drink, told to drink it in order to come in. Guy drank it, felt weird, wound up in a room where he alleged Diddy performed non-consensual oral sex on him. And afterwards, Diddy forced him to perform oral sex on another celebrity who was in the room. The man remembers waking up outside his apartment without his shirt or his phone, had no idea what happened. The second suit is the one I was referring to. 13 years old. Now it's 20 years later, but 13. Diddy and another male celebrity raped her, and a female celebrity watched it all happen. This was in 2000, the VMAs, the Video Music Awards at Radio City Music Hall. A limo driver allegedly told her that he worked with Diddy and that he liked younger girls. She would fit right in for what he was looking for. He invited her to Diddy's after party, drove her there. Once at the party, again, similar. Sign the NDA, have this drink, starts to feel weird, and then, this is what she says in her suit. Soon after, Combs, along with a male and female celebrity. Okay? Now, this is coded language, obviously, right? Who? Why don't they tell? We're going to discuss in a second. Combs aggressively approached the plaintiff with a crazed look in his eyes and said, "You're ready to party." Combs then threw the plaintiff towards another male celebrity, Celebrity A, who removed plaintiff's clothes as she grew more and more disoriented. Plaintiff was held down by Celebrity A, vaginally raped her. Combs and Celebrity B, a female, watched. After the rape, Combs then vaginally raped plaintiff, while both celebrities A and B watched. Is this the expansive nature to this narrative that can take Diddy to another level in terms of why it's such a high target for prosecutors? Let's bring in journalist Touré, who knows Diddy, and defense attorney Arthur Aidala, who represents Ghislaine Maxwell, which is why I brought it up about the Epstein case. Okay, Celebrity Touré, let me start with this. Celebrity A and Celebrity B. Obviously, the plaintiff knows who those people are. What does that mean in terms of the storytelling of this if big names start getting dragged into it for not just knowing what Diddy did, but doing it with Diddy?
I mean, I definitely know that is something that people are hungry for, and they want to know who else is involved. And there's this sort of prurient desire to see other people brought down in this. And surely Puff did not do all this alone. There are other people who need to be held accountable for creating a web of enabling and protecting him while he did all these sorts of things. But I'm not sitting here waiting to see, who else is named. The big fish in this situation is Puff. He is the one, if the government story is correct, if the complainant stories are correct, is the one who is initiating these incidents and is wrapping other people up in his madness. Tony Busby in all of his lawsuits, he's the one out of Houston doing 120, keeps talking about a sexual quid pro quo that Puff created, where people understood in order to get to be a singer or a producer or what have you in his circle, you had to go along with what he wanted you to do at night. So, he is the big dog in all of this. And these other stories, I get it, I guess, but it seems very gossipy when we have this very real, very frightening story right in front of us.
It is, until you put two words made into one after it. Subpoena. And Arthur, this is what people thought was going to happen with Epstein. That, Diddy's not Epstein in terms of, let's say, the level of money guys and international guys that he was running around with, but there are big names around him, and you get a subpoena, and you got to become part of this litigation, and it's about what you knew. It can really take it to the next level. This was what everybody thought was going to happen with Epstein, and then he killed himself.
Well, yeah, but Epstein was the criminal case. Let's keep in mind all these allegations you're talking about are not in a criminal court right now. They are in a civil court, and the subpoena power is much weaker in civil court than it is in criminal court. But Chris, the story with the 13-year-old would break anybody's heart. It is a 24-year-old story, and in the complaint, it says that she has suffered every day over the last 24 years. It makes you wonder why she never complained to anybody who would have brought her to a lawyer or to law enforcement any one of the days in the past 24 years. The other story, Chris, is that the guy is drugged to the point where he's performing oral sex on someone else. And I don't know if any drug, and I've done cases like this as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, where you're so drugged, where you're performing oral sex on a man. So, I know Diddy's going to have some great lawyers around him who are going to be able to question these people. All of these cases with the hotline numbers make me nervous. They did it against my client, Harvey Weinstein. If you know something about us, dial 1-800-HARVEY and tell us your story, and you're going to get a big payday. And that's what lawyers got to think about, is whether this is just a big money grab.
Well, listen, I appreciate you both on this. The only thing, look, we'll see. For me, it's certainly not prurient interest. It's what does Diddy do to try to get himself out of trouble? And that's when this story will go to the next level. Because look, Teray, if he doesn't want to take a deal where he's going to be gone for a long time, he's going to have to offer something to these guys.
But Chris,
I'll give you a last quick thought on that.
That's not a real option in this situation. He cannot explain some gigantic conspiracy that is larger than the one that he's in. He's not a mid-level Cosa Nostra who can tell you how John Gotti actually gets this stuff done. He doesn't have a bunch of information that he can give to law enforcement that will change their understanding of the criminal underworld. He doesn't have any information that he can talk and get out of this. That's a weird fantasy that people keep bringing up, that like he's going to name some names and somehow that will get him out of it. Like, no, that's not available to him.
Well, we'll see. And I hear why you're saying it, Teray, but we'll see where it takes us. Teray, appreciate you very much. Arthur Idala, thank you very much. Appreciate you both. Good to see you both. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. A case that's not just about the law, but a real example of how our times, not just in New York City, but we're just so split over everything. Okay, what do you see in this Daniel Penny case? Is this a guy who was just looking to choke somebody out, some kind of crazed former Marine? Or was it a guy doing what he thought was right and it went wrong? Boy, oh boy, are people divided about this. Is it a murder or is it a mishap? Two sides next. And I was just talking to Dusty. I mean, maybe I'm too crude from a psycho-emotional point of view. I get it all intellectually. I'm a lawyer. I've been covering crime for over 20 years. But once somebody is trying to hurt somebody else, the idea that, well, it doesn't mean you can kill them. It doesn't mean you can hurt them. But that other case where the guy who already sexually assaulted the kid is then with her again and the father catches him, what do you think's going to happen? Oh, you're supposed to be better than that. Daniel Penny. There's a mentally ill, addicted, both. To me, it's, addiction is part of mental illness. On the subway, harassing, threatening. He gets involved. He doesn't shoot him. He doesn't punch him and bash his head against a seat until he's dead. He puts him in a choke restraint. Another guy is helping him. Penny is using a rear naked choke, basically, which I know looks dramatic, but I got to tell you, it is not the worst way to subdue somebody. The guy dies. Penny is charged with second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide because he killed 30-year-old homeless man, Jordan Neely, by putting him in that choke. Prosecutors say he held Neely, who also had drug problems for, a long time. He says he held him for 6 minutes before releasing the body that was limp. Penny says he was moving around. The other guy was helping. He never meant to do anything like that to him. He was trying to do the minimum, not a maximum. Is it a good Samaritan or is he a murderer? After a full day of jury selection, more than 90 people have already been dismissed. Why? Because you're going to have preconceived notions about this. Can you get a jury? What is this case going to turn on? For the defense, Paul Callan, okay, and former DA, defense attorney. And to explain the prosecution's case, former Bronx DA Peter Frankel. It's good to have you both here. Frankel, thank you for doing this. I got to tell you, Frankel, I think you got a tough lift on this. I think the court of public opinion is one thing. I think the court of law is another one. But from the prosecution's perspective, what is the case?
Well, I appreciate you having me, Chris. Look, you have to start with applying the facts to the law in this case. And you just laid out what the two theories are. One is that he consciously disregarded the risk that he created. The other was that he didn't even realize that he had created a risk. But at the end of the day, this is going to come down to whether his behavior was reasonable, okay? Or was it a gross deviation from what was reasonable under the circumstances? Number one, okay, Mr. Neely wasn't involved physically with anyone, okay? Was he behaving well? No. Have you been on the subway lately? There's a lot of bad behavior. Number two, as you pointed out, he was choked past the point that the prosecution will allege there was any purposeful movement. So there were less intrusive. Go ahead.
But Peter, two things. The points of pushback is he never gets involved if there isn't a female writer who feels harassed by Neely. And that's what starts the altercation. And two, how about the other guys in the video? How about the guy with the hat? He's not telling Neely to let him go. It's too much. He's holding him down. How about the other guy who's standing there watching it all? He could have told Neely as a reasonable person, this looks like too much. What about those two?
Chris, they're not charged for whatever reason the prosecution decided not to charge them, but we're focused on Penny's behavior, okay?
But I'm saying they weren't bothered by Penny's behavior. They don't say what you're saying.
Well, there were a lot of people that were on the train that were bothered by his behavior. So that's why there are tribal issues of fact here. And, I ask you, there are civilians involved in physical street encounters every day of the week. They don't typically end up dead, Chris. And so you have to ask yourself, was there a less intrusive means of restraining Mr. Neely than was used by Daniel Penny? Was it reasonable, or was it a gross deviation from what was reasonable? And I think that there's a strong argument to be made that it was a gross deviation.
Paul, I give you the time to do the other thing. I will just point out to people, just again, the idea that this guy is some trained killer, he doesn't even have the rear naked choke sunk in all the way. This hand should have been all the way around and pulling in on his arm and his hand up. So I'm just saying that there's this conception out there, and it's going to come out at trial, that this is what he was trained to do. He's a trained killer. That's not what's going on here. Paul, what's the defense?
Well, I think you raise a good point about his background, and the prosecutors are going to say he's a trained killer. Well, let's talk about the training that goes on in the Marine Corps about chokeholds. The Marines are guys who tend to kill people with weapons, with knives, with submachine guns, with all kinds of weapons. They use chokeholds as a non-lethal method of subduing somebody. And that's why they're trained in it. And that's what they're told. Now, they are told that you can accidentally kill somebody in a chokehold, but it's very, very rare that such a thing happens. So put that in the mind of the defendant in this case, of Daniel Penny. He thinks he's using non-lethal force. He has seen the defendant walking around the train, threatening to kill people. There are women and children on the train, according to some of the witnesses. He also says, one of the things he says is he's ready to go to Rikers Island. And remember, this goes back to 2023. I think there had been as many as 10 murders in the subway system. This was that period of time where people were being pushed in front of moving subway trains by guys just like Neely, mentally deranged people who belong in treatment and not on subway trains. So I think when you put all of those factors together, a jury will have a very, very large pile of evidence to suggest that Neely doesn't deserve to have his life ruined and to be convicted of manslaughter. He was trying to help the other people on the train. And you know what's going to happen if you convict him? You're going to scare good Samaritans every place. Who's going to have the courage to stand up to a bully who's trying to abuse a woman or a child on a subway train when they think NYPD is going to come in and Alvin Bragg's going to prosecute him for murder? I think there are a lot of societal implications that juries will think about, even though the law, they won't be charged on this. But as ordinary human beings, you have to think about this kind of thing.
Yeah. Listen, I hear you. Again, another thing, everybody looks at it through the lens of who they are, right? Now, nobody's objective on anything like this. For me, with all the training I've had over the years, somebody gets you in a rear naked choke and applies it the same way. This doesn't go on for 60 seconds, let alone 6 minutes. So again, the idea that he had to be trying to do less than what he could have, because that choke, it doesn't work out. I'm telling you, I've had people lift my legs and bring me back after being choked out from exactly that maneuver. And I'm laughing because, there's an absurdity to how it's being described. You don't need to go past that Neely is dead and he didn't need to die for this to be stopped. Now, you get into the legal responsibility of that. It's a hard argument, but it's all blown out of proportion. Mr. Frankel, thank you for perspective. Mr. Callan, thank you for perspective. A couple of nice sets of heads there, too, by the way. Don't kid yourself. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Perspective on the election. Not from pros, not from people with skin in the game. Someone who doesn't like what they're seeing, who's articulate enough to discuss it, and who knows something about developing a following. Have you seen Gen X Talks? Look at it in the break. Gen X, G-E-N-X Talks. It's these kids, it's usually the son, but the son and the daughter, and this guy, who I love. And it is a beautiful demonstration of the rift between parents and kids generationally, but politically. What's happening in this election? Let's get their take.
If I was a news anchor going through an interview with Kamala and she goes off the reservation, starts running her mouth when she's all the way done, I'd go, yeah, but nobody asked you about that. Nobody, that isn't even close. Let's try again. I'm going to start the same question over again. Kind of got a feeling you're going to give me a 6-minute answer, but you didn't even come close to answering it.
That is Mark Mendenhall, okay? Huge fan right here. Why? Gen X Talks. I had him on here. He was on with his 18-year-old son, Briggs. I think they have 8 kids, he and his wife. But the beauty of Gen X Talks, and you should check it out yourself. It's viral on TikTok and with good reason. It's a great demonstration. Mendenhall's hilarious. But the way he seeds at how his next generation of kids, the generation after them, see things that are so obvious to him, from a generational perspective is awesome. But you also saw in his podcast, he has a very independent streak to him politically. And I love it, okay? He's a mechanic, 30 years, obviously an intellectual, big-time parent. I want to bring him in because I want his perspective on where we are and what this race is turning on. Host of Gen X Talks, Mark Mendenhall. Good to see you, big man.
Hey, Chris. It's nice to see you again.
So, what do you think this election is going to be about in terms of what moves the needle towards one side or the other ultimately in your estimation?
Yeah, that's tough. It just seems like, when you and I were kids growing up, politics was the last thing that you introduced yourself as. It was the last thing that anybody wanted to know. You wanted to know where you worked and how old you were, you married and kids and stuff like that. Way down the road, you asked about someone's politics and you really didn't care. Now, it's like the first thing they ask if they're going to be friends with you or not. So I kind of think everybody's dug in. You could point out stuff about Kamala that's horrible and people won't care if they're on her side. You could point out stuff about Trump that's horrible and people won't care. I think the decisions right now are in the people that can be swayed one way or the other. And boy, I don't know. You'd have to touch on a subject that those people care about. You got to find out what those swing voters, the people that can be moved on either side, what are they interested in? Because the big picture is already painted. Everybody kind of knows the broad strokes of what everybody's about. I don't know, Chris. It's a tough one right now, that's for sure.
It's because the choices suck. What would you like to see change?
What would I like? Change in what? What do you mean?
Our politics. Our system.
Oh, yeah, term limits. I think a big thing would be fixed with term limits. If you could get people that are career politicians on both sides of the aisle out of there, anybody who's been in public service for more than 25 years, I think they're part of the problem. They're no longer part of the solution.
How about duration of campaigns and when you're allowed to? As we both know, a lot of other countries have limits. You can only run commercials for this long. You can only be out there doing those kinds of events. All that stuff. I mean, we're in like perma campaign mode now. But what do you think the division really comes down to?
Well, it comes down to perspective. I think it's just the perspective on the candidates. I think to answer your first question, put some definite rules out there, limit it. I think the more we limit government, the better we are. I think the more we limit campaigning, the better we are. As long as it's even for both sides, who cares? If both sides get the same amount of time to campaign, but it's less on us, then we win. As the American people, we win. But as far as what's causing the division, if that's what you're getting at, I think it's perspective. I think the media has painted a picture of Kamala. They've painted a picture of Trump. And I think both sides do equal damage to the other side while propping their own person up. So right now, it's whoever does a better job of making the American people believe them. Because they both can't be right. Both sides can't have the best candidate. Both sides can't say the other one's terrible. There's too many rights and wrongs in there. They can't always be right. So it's who you can convince. I think that's it. It's public opinion. That's it right now.
I think you're spot on. Let's do this. I'll check back with you right after the election, and we'll see what happened, what we know about why it happened. And then we'll start talking about how we get to a better place. Because I got to tell you, it takes a lot to surprise me. We're doing this J.D. Vance town hall in Detroit on Thursday. I love town halls. It's not a great venue for me, right? Because it's not an interview. It's not like a debate or anything. But it's great for people to be able to ask questions and watch candidates deal with real people on their own terms. I can't tell you how many people told me that I'm a traitor for giving him the opportunity. That's where we are now. That's where we are. Anyway, I got to jump.
I hear that.
Big man, I got to jump.
Chris, I hear that all the time about you, too, and I'm on your side on that one. I am.
Yeah. I mean, look, I hear tons of bad stuff about me. That one just doesn't make sense. All right, I got to jump. We'll be right back. Thanks, big man. Gen X Talks.